Yo, hi, welcome to the 12th little soundtracking extra YouTube show. Thank you so much for tuning in, subscribing, commenting, all that thing. It's wonderful to have you with us. Couple of great guests coming up for you. Terence Blanchard, he's a legend. He's a great composer, musician, just all-round dude, and has worked so much with Spike Lee. You'll hear him talk about that in a bit. You'll also hear him in a full episode of the podcast in coming weeks. Podcast this week is Patrick Doyle, legendary composer who has worked with so many people. You might have heard him on this show last week, where you can hear our chat in its entirety on this week's podcast. So make sure you are subscribed to us on your usual podcast provider. And Patrick talks about Amma Asante, a fantastic British director that he worked with on her third film, A United Kingdom. And I have Amma for you today. I was very lucky to get to sit down with her for a BAFTA masterclass last week. And I was like, will you please come and do the podcast? She said yes. So she's actually going to be next week's episode for the podcast, so you can hear this chat in full. But here's a couple of little excerpts of her talking about her debut film, A Way of Life, in which music inspired her to write while she was writing. And then it had a beautiful full circle relationship to working with the composer on that film, as you'll hear, Mr. David Gray. To then Prince being blown away by her second film, Belle, and the lengths that he went to after watching that film, which we'll hear her talk about. And then working on Mrs. America, which is a fantastic BBC HBO series that's just started on the BBC, so you can check it out in the iPlayer. It has got a formidable cast: Sarah Paulson, Kate Blanchett, Rose Byrne, so many people. Anyway, Amma has directed 2 episodes, episodes 3 and 4, and she's done a great job. The series is awesome. It's so good. I've watched it all. Highly recommend it. But please sit back and just enjoy the wonderful and inspiring nature and human being that is Amma Asante. It was really lovely the other night when we talked about so much, and it was amazing because one of the messages I got back from the BAFTA lot was just like, I can't believe how much the pair of you got through, in terms of how much there was there to give other people watching, in terms of it being a masterclass. But one of the things that we didn't talk about at all was music, and about kind of scoring your films and scoring your projects, and working with an amazing collection of composers, and some first-time composers, which is a wonderful opportunity for you as a director to give someone as well, and that trust as well. And then people like Patrick, who are like ingrained in terms of what they've already achieved. But when you think back to A Way of Life and working with David Gray, and he'd never composed a film before, I don't think, or since, weirdly, but
I think he might have done a little bit of music for some.
Okay.
There was a movie that a small movie that came before, probably about the same size as A Way of Life, but certainly I think this was his first full movie to score. Or I think he had written a song and it was used in a movie, and it was specifically for the movie, but this was like the first time he had scored anything. And that was just, first and foremost, I wrote A Way of Life, which was my first film, to White Ladder.
Wow.
And
so I get him to do it. That's amazing.
It is so amazing. So basically, I listened like day in and day out and day in, and it never got old. It just never got old. It just put me where I needed to be to write those characters and tell that story. So I got to the end and finally got to, like, I don't know, the 8th draft or something like that. And my producer said, have you thought about music? And sometimes you don't even think about music. They don't ask you to think about music. You do as the writer, but they don't ask you to until you're halfway through production or something. But I said, really, I would like to write to David Gray, and I know it's a long shot. And it was sort of, the ignorance of innocence in a way. And everybody just sort of looked at me a little bit like they felt sorry for me, and just said, well, go on then if you want to. So we found out who his manager was, and my producer wrote to his manager and I wrote to him. So we sent the 2 letters together. And I just wrote to him and I said, I've written this entire script listening to your music, and if you feel that it's not right for you to do this, then I just won't have any music in it at all. We just won't have a score. I think I sent it to him maybe on the Thursday or something like that, and by the Tuesday I was meeting him down in Crouch End at this bar. And then I remember us having an interview later, much later on, with the big issue. And I remember him saying, I really literally expected like some scarred white woman to rock up, and then you rocked up just because it was set in Wales. And I guess the concept of me writing this story about these kids who essentially didn't like black people, I guess he just hadn't expected to come from, you know, someone like me. And so I think he thought like literally I was going to be a Leanne, the lead character in the movie, writing like my own life story or something like that. So, you know, he took his time and he wrote, oh my God, I just remember the first time I heard like the theme song to it, and he called me into the studio, and I went in and I sat and I listened to it, and it was just incredible. And I remember leaving his studio and just running down the street, just screaming, just like literally screaming, because it was so great. But that was a coup. First film, that was a coup.
That's amazing. But it was really interesting. It's lovely to think that the music had a real connection to the actual kind of, you know, the emotion that you were putting into writing it as well, and see that coming full circle is wonderful.
Yeah, no, and it's lucky. And I don't know that, you know, I haven't dared to think, well, actually the next person was Rachel Portman, where I thought, oh, wouldn't it be lovely to get Rachel Portman for this? But I kind of didn't really dare to let that really live in my head, because I just didn't think that we would get there. I just didn't think we could afford it, to be honest with you. And with David, I guess when at the point where we went to David, I didn't really even know how much films cost, if that made sense. You know,
Yeah,
let alone like what's it mean?
I don't think anyone does still.
No, exactly. They cost more than they should. And so the idea of like, well, what does it mean to have David, and like contractually, what does it all mean, and like what happens to the music, and you know, all of that. What does it all mean? I don't know. I didn't know what any of that meant. I just knew that artistically and creatively, for some reason, I connected with this man. And I'm just going to name drop for one really quick second. But I after I did Belle, you know, Prince did an after party, threw an after party for Belle. And
wait, can we just take 1 second? Yeah. Prince threw you an after party.
He did, and he played for 3 hours, which was absolutely incredible.
Oh my
God. It was in London. It was so great, and it was amazing. And he had these T-shirts, these kind of long sleeve T-shirts printed with like Dido Belle on the front, and all these posters up. But later on, you know, a few weeks after that, I got a call, and you know, Prince wants to fly over to Paisley Park, and so eventually I went, you know, on this first trip. And when I went, we sat down and we talked, and I had the headache from hell, because I was so nervous and so afraid, and just didn't know how to respond to this person sitting in front of me, who had also given me so much just by that one concert. And I just remember him saying to me, I'm an artist and you're an artist. And it was that, I know, which is just that whole thing. And it was kind of like, it was almost like he kind of let the air out of the balloon in a really good way, because all the pressure in my head kind of just released. It was just like, just treat him like he's normal, Amma, just treat him like he's normal. And I tried my best, and things got a lot better after that. But it is that thing of kind of acknowledging that art can inspire art, and often does, you know, and David Gray's music inspired my work. And I think it came around full circle when he then said in an interview, you know, I read down his script, and it made me want to write a song, which was lovely.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we need to arrange another episode that's just purely talking about Prince, okay?
Oh my God!
But that's not my focus today, because my focus is you and your amazing films.
Do not be afraid. I am here to take you to a good life. A life that you were born to. I beg you, Uncle, love her as I would were I here, and ensure that she is in receipt of all that is due to her as a child of mine.
Do you have in mind my position?
That is simply impossible.
What is right can never be impossible.
What has she been named?
Dido Belle Lindsay.
She takes your name.
I am not ashamed.
We will call her Dido.
Elizabeth was in much need of a companion.
And that is what we shall say when questions are asked.
We shall be receiving visitors for dinner.
Why do you not dine with your family ever?
Because that is not correct.
May I present the second of my two nieces, Miss Dido Lindsay?
I find her repulsive.
Papa, how may I be too high in rank to dine with the servants and too low to dine with my family?
Though I understand she is kept under interesting rules, she raises questions.
Would you do me the honor of taking some air with me?
Don't you care what people will say?
What should anyone say?
I had no idea she would be so
Black.
One does not make a wife of the rare and exotic.
Does she still have a tongue? I have a tongue.
Though yours explains well enough why I may not marry your son. My greatest misfortune would be to marry into a family who would carry me as their shame.
I've enabled every rule of convention so that you would know exactly where you belong.
I don't know that I find myself anywhere. Do you love her?
As though she were created of you and me.
What of your mother?
I know very little of her other than the colour she has given me.
Then at least you know she was beautiful.
You would risk your position for a man without name.
Laws that allow us to diminish the humanity of anybody are not laws.
He speaks a voice for people who do not have one.
If I had your choice, I would choose the man I loved.
There are rules in place which dictate how we live.
You break every rule when it matters enough, Papa. I am the evidence.
When you're working on TV stuff, when there's a like Mrs. America, which I've watched it all now, by the way. Oh my God, it's so good. It's so good. But music's a massive part of that. And you've got this brilliant theme tune, which is this kind of version of Beethoven's Fifth, which just like, it's that kind of funk version. It kind of adds instant sass, it makes me walk taller and sort of, shake my bits. But then you have this brilliant use of, there's obviously score in there as well. Chris Bohr's done the score, who's amazing. I loved his Green Book score was brilliant. But all these brilliant uses of like needle drops, and in particular your episodes. So you did 3 and 4, is that right?
Yeah, I did 3 and 4. And, music wise, it's really interesting because so when we're filming, the editor will drop his music, his or her music that they sort of holding pieces.
Yeah.
And so my editor had dropped the holding pieces that he liked, that he thought were right. And I got into, this is the 3 I'm thinking of now. Yeah. And I got in and just sort of watched the cut, as in the editor's cut, and we were going to go through it and really start to really cut it as I saw it. And but his music choices were just really great, and I was like, we're not changing these. We're not changing these. We have to keep these. These are perfect. And I think we might have made little amendments. And I do remember. So Mary Ramos was the music supervisor, and she had a Dropbox the size of Ghana, and my editor, who was absolutely excellent, had gone through and picked, the tracks that he liked, and then I think he had just been listening to stuff anyway, because we were all steeping ourselves in the period and in the music. And I looked down one day and I was like, I suddenly have 3 pairs of high-waisted flare jeans. And I know I never had flared jeans last week. Out comes, and basically over the weekend I was going down to the shopping centre, and I realised that every time I bought a pair of jeans, they were like 1970s literally jeans. So I was morphing, and then suddenly my glasses were pink, and then I had a little parting in my hair, and then I was kind of like, this is. And then at one point, I was shooting a big chunk of 3, and I looked around and I was like, I look like I could just hang out in this scene. And so I think we were all just steeping ourselves as much as possible, like every department was doing that. And this really super cool music, riffs that Beyonce uses today in some of her tracks, but it was really important. And I think in a way, for me, that's one of the reasons why the Shirley episode for me, it kind of really stands out for me as an episode that and a little bit of 4 as well, from a music point of view, when we do the Black feminists kind of get together at Flo Kennedy's house, and we're using, we've got the incidental music there as well, because it, I remember my mum in that period. You know, I was really tiny, and there's some of my earliest memories, but I remember my mum and dad, funky as they would put me to bed at 2 o'clock sometimes on a Saturday afternoon, and then wake me up, and I'd go to a party with them.
Amazing.
And so I'd go to a party with them, and my mom had this like afro, and she was like gorgeous, and my dad had his afro, and then I inevitably get exhausted, of course, within the first hour of being there. You know, I'd slept all up, and then they put me to sleep on the coats in the bedroom. But everyone, once in a while, you'd get up and have a peek at the party that was going on, you know, in the living room.
Yeah.
And it felt like I was just being able to kind of recreate you know, bring back the music of the time, and just some of those memories, basically, of who my mum was at that time. Was just lovely. That's what the music did for me.
Revolutions are messy. I am not against women. I am not against women working outside the home. But what I am against is the women's liberation movement.
Our movement is about fighting the oppression of all women.
We want the right to be a mother, the right to be a wife.
So now we're not going to have people we disagree with participate?
This fight is not about equality. It's about power.
When did you get so mean?
We don't get to decide how the battle lines are drawn.
Did you really think there'd be no casualties?
Why would God put this fire in me if he didn't want me to act on it?
Do you know what I loved as well was the this weird kind of, if people, so we did this wonderful chat last week for BAFTA, and people should go, I think it's made available soon, or if not already, for people to go and listen to, and you absolutely should, in terms of if you are anyway interested in making film. Amma's journey is extraordinary. You talk in great length about, you know, being an actress, and Anthony Minghella working on Grange Hill and all this kind of stuff. And what was amazing when I was thinking about it was Mrs. America, and the fact that, you know, towards the end of that series, Reagan's about to come into power, and you went to the States for the Just Say No campaign and met Nancy Reagan. This is like a weird world circle of life. It's I was like, this is mental and brilliant. I love kind of.
No, well, I mean, trust me, it's mental for you. It's so much more mental for me, because, you know, when I was doing Grange Hill, I was not in this world of filmmaking and, you know, the world that I'm in today. I was not in. I was a little girl, a powerless little girl, you know, relying on her mum and dad to put the food on the table, basically, living in South London and going home to Streatham every single day. And, you know, the White House did not figure in my world in any way, shape or form. And so to get this big, well, we knew that there was going to be a trip to America, and Nancy Reagan was inviting 9 kids, but we didn't know which 9. I think there were maybe 27 lead or key characters in Grange Hill at the time. So we didn't know which of us would be picked. And my storyline didn't have anything to do with the heroine storyline that then connected us to Just Say No. So when we saw a courier arrived, I mean, you've got to remember this was like 1986, and a courier arrives with a big brown envelope and walks up to the door, and I'm looking out the window, you know, and I see him come through the gate, and I run and I grab it, but it's addressed to my dad. Because, you know, and then I have to wait for my dad to get home, and he opens it and he's like, you're going to go to Washington, and you're going to go to New York. And I'd never been away from both of my parents at the same time before. So there was that side of it. So there was going to America for the first time, seeing New York for the first time, a place I'd only ever seen in the movies, literally. And then being in the White House and thinking to myself, in a way, you better enjoy this, because like life will go back to normal, and you know this is something really special that's happening really now. And of course it was really special, it was, but it's by no means the most special thing that's ever happened in my life since. My life, I had my whole life ahead of me, and I didn't know at that time. So there is this full circle, because I'm sort of sitting there thinking what probably none of the other filmmakers on the show are thinking, because I'm thinking, yeah, I met Nancy Reagan, and and not only that, I've used their toilet roll. I was thinking, because that was a thing, deliberately. I knew my mum would say to me, what was the toilet roll like? So I had to go to the loo to find
our
out.
mums sound very similar.
Right, so I knew she would ask, so I had to go and find out, as all of us did one by one. I think they were very irritated by us, because one by one we all said, to use the toilet, please.
It's nice.
Bathroom. Exactly. So it definitely felt full circle, but also what it did was show me that all this entire period that we're dealing with was not that long ago. Not in my lifetime, it wasn't.
Yeah.
And that I was there right on the end of it. You know, I was there before the end of it, but I mean, like, I literally, you know, stepped into their space right on the end of it. And you know, it's times like that where you do wonder if there is a sort of bigger messaging that's going on with our lives and what we're, you know, supposed to do with these lives. I do have to ask myself that question sometimes, but you know, it seemed like a fitting full circle moment for me in many ways. It really did. It really did.
I hope we can do this again, because I love chatting to you, so I can make it a weekly
I'd
occurrence.
love to. I'd really, really love to. Thank you so much for having me. It's like the greatest pleasure. My husband said to me, "Oh, you're going to do Edith Bowman's soundtrack? Are you really? Are you?" I said, "Yeah." She's like, "Has she actually asked you?" And I was like, "Yes, actually, Sovereign. She has asked me."
And this is only the first of many episodes, hopefully, as well. So yeah, for sure.
This is great. I feel really blessed to, like, twice in 7 days, have been able to sit and have a chat with you. So thank you so much.
Pleasure is all mine. It's the closest thing to sort of normal and being excited about work. It's just the best thing ever. So thank you so much for your time, lovely. And yes, stay safe. And I hopefully I get to chat to you again soon. I genuinely could talk to that woman every day. She's just, I love her. Her energy is infectious. If you aren't that familiar with Amma's work, please do go and check out her films. A Way of Life, Belle, United Kingdom, Where Hands Touch. She also directed a few episodes of The Handmaid's Tale, Mrs. America, and then her new film that she's about, hopefully, to start filming at some point this year, The $1 Billion Spy. But she's great. So look out for the full episode of the podcast with her coming up next week. Next up, Terence Blanchard. I mean, I don't really know what to say about the man or where to start with the man, but you again will hear him in his entirety in the coming weeks on a full episode of the podcast. And this was just a short extract of our conversation. He was wonderful. I was quite nervous about chatting to him, but he was great. He's been a long-term collaborator with Spike Lee, taken over from Spike's dad as composer on his films. And prior to that, he had featured on a couple of Spike's films just as a player, but a contributor more than that on Do the Right Thing. We talk a bit about working with Spike. The Five Bloods is the most recent film they worked on. He's also composed this new TV series, Perry Mason, which is great. I've seen a couple of episodes of it, and he's soon to be heard on Regina King's directorial debut, I believe, which you'll hear him talk about in a second. But I hope you enjoy listening to him as much as I enjoyed chatting to him. Terence Blanchard.
Spike was hiring us all to write little things, you know what I mean? Like, when he heard something I was messing around with on the piano when we were doing music for More Better Blues, and then he asked to use it. And then he wanted me to write string arrangement for it. Mm-hmm. So I think that was my audition.
Okay,
you know
yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
And I think when I came in with the arrangement, he heard it, you know, he came over to me and he goes, "Man, you got a future in this business." And I went, okay. You know, I didn't think nothing of it. You know, I was like, thank you, you know. And then after that, man, he called me to do Jungle Fever. And even when we did Jungle Fever, I thought it was just like a one-off, you know, like, you know, because when it came time to do Malcolm X, that was such a big project. I just figured he was going to go get a well-established person, you know, to do that. And
you were established as a musician. That's the thing, you know. You were
as a film composer, not as a. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Thank you. I mean, as a musician, yeah, I had developed a reputation and established myself as a performer. But writing for orchestra, that's something totally different. So when it came time to think about it, and he called me and asked me, did I want to do it? You know, I immediately, started studying scores. I started picking up film scores on CDs, and I would just constantly listen. I just did a ton of homework, and
who did you listen to?
Oh man, I listened to everybody. John Williams, Thomas Newman, Jerry Goldsmith, Elmer Bernstein, Quincy Jones. The list, whoever was out at the time. Yeah, I was trying to find a handle on it. And then I went back and I started listening to, great classical music that I love, Stravinsky and Debussy and stuff like that, just to get a handle on how an orchestra can move, and and then I just kept working, and I'm still trying to grow from that moment on.
Well, I guess that's the wonderful thing, isn't it, with composing, is that you're almost kind of set a task in a way, but each experience is very different and unique to the requirements of that, based on the narrative, the director, the performances.
Yes.
And so I guess that's, with each project, it is kind of like, it's learning a new thing almost in a way, but using everything prior to that with it.
It is. The crazy thing about it, I've been on so many panel discussions with other composers, and it was such a therapeutic thing to hear them say the exact same thing that I feel, which is whenever you start a project, you feel like you don't really know how to do this. I don't know what it is about it. You can look at a film and you just go, okay, what do I do? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's that moment of just like total, I don't want to say, it's not fear, but it's just like a questioning of like, okay, what is this? And I think the reason for that is because, and this is just my own thoughts, I think that happens because theoretically you realize there's so many ways to approach it.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to find the way that's going to resonate with the director.
Black Klansman was an extraordinary film. And I was listening to the score on that, and I think what was so clever as well was the way that you incorporated that kind of military kind of drumming. Here's me trying to put it into words, but again, it's like it's all emotion when I watch it and I listen to it, but trying to vocalize it can be difficult sometimes. But that kind of this sort of those historical military drumming patterns that are beautifully and really cleverly weaved into parts of the score, and it's so seamless but so powerful as well, because they do a lot.
Yeah, well, the thing about that is that we were really trying to, in a way, we were trying to show the absurdity of it all. You know what I mean? It's like, first of all, who knew that up in that part of the country that the Klan was that strong? I had no idea. I always thought it was a Southern thing, primarily based in the South. And then for Ron Stallworth to be a rookie cop and to infiltrate the Klan on the phone is also absurd and crazy,
So good.
But the other part of it, the main part of it too, is that, I had fun with the period. When you saw John David's character as Ron Stallworth enter the first frame with that afro and that leather jacket and those jeans, man, it brought me right back to my days in high school. Oh my God.
See, you were putting yourself in there again. I love it. They're all personal experiences that are going into these. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about it. I remember, for some reason, the anxiety of trying to get that first dance at the dance, when you're a little kid.
Yeah.
All of that stuff came back. But the other thing that I thought about too was Jimi Hendrix, playing the national anthem, and just how radical it was at the time. But radical in a way that this guy had served his country and he was very patriotic, and he did what I thought was a very patriotic thing in playing the national anthem that way, because it was screaming, well, like we were just talking about for the Five Bloods,
Yeah.
you know, screaming to have his rights, you know, just like everybody else. So we were trying to show the dual side of this coin, and we're starting to see all the results of that with all of these movements that are happening all over the world now. You know, people trying to fight bigotry, intolerance, and hatred. You know, because we're all human beings. You know, it's an absurd notion to see people who call themselves Christians but still can judge people based on skin color, type, or religious backgrounds. And with that film, the entire film is all about the weird kind of juxtaposition of those two things.
Before I let you go, do you mind if I just talk to you quickly about One Night in Miami as well? Because I'm so excited to, well, I love Regina King. And what was really interesting as well was I was very lucky to speak to both Barry Jenkins and Nicholas Britell about If Beale Street Could Talk. And one of the things that Nicholas said about the score for that was that if someone else had played that character, the score would have been totally different, because it was very much written around Regina's performance and you know, and what she gave to that character and what exuded from that performance as well, which I found absolutely fascinating and brilliant. But I'm so excited to hear her voice as a director. And you know, what's she like as a boss then? You know, she's the boss, man.
No, she's brilliant.
Yeah, I bet.
Let me just say that. She's brilliant. She's smart. She is it's that rare combination of somebody who's extremely cool to be around, but definitely knows what she's doing, you know, and knows what she's looking for.
Yeah.
I told her, I said, you put together a phenomenal movie. You know, I said, get ready, because your life's about to change. Because I think what she did with this film, she found 4 great actors, you know, to play these roles. And the way this film is put together, it is such a uniquely brilliant story.
Yeah.
That, you know, I'm just, I told her I'm honored to just be thought of, to be a part of, you know, because she did a phenomenal job. I can't wait for people to see what it is that she's put together. I met her when we did the Oscar run, when they called everybody's name up to take a picture at the luncheon for all of the nominees. I was standing next to her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had you got the job yet?
No. I didn't even know she was doing the movie. No. And I told her, I said, man, I got to call my mom and tell her I'm standing next to Regina King. She says, I got to call my mom and tell her I'm standing next to Terence Blanchard.
I love that.
And we were just cool from that moment on. And then we actually hung out in London, man, at the BAFTAs.
Oh, wow.
Nick, Barry, Regina, myself, my wife, we all hung out together, man, and just had a great time. Nick is one of my good friends. He's a sweet dude, man.
He's wonderful. Yeah.
I was just on the phone with him a couple of days ago.
Oh, give him my love when you speak to him next.
Yeah.
Great. Well, listen, next time you're in London, hopefully we can get to do this again in person.
Sure.
And I'd love to get the chance to speak to you again for One Night in Miami when it's coming out as well. Looks like cinemas might be reopening, so we have everything crossed now as well, which is great. Yeah. Terence, thank you so much for your time, sir. As I say, it's a real privilege and honour to get to chat to you, and thank you for everything, and look forward to what's to come as well.
Thank you. It's been great talking to you.
You too. Stay safe. Thank you, sir. Bye. Terence Blanchard. You can hear the full extent of our chat on the podcast in the coming weeks. So there we go, that's this week's show. Just a couple of guests for you this week. Our 12th episode. Thank you so much once again for everybody for your comments, for subscribing, for spreading the word. Please, if you haven't already subscribed, there's a button here. And please do listen to this week's episode of Soundtracking, the podcast, which features Mr. Patrick Doyle, who has worked with so many people. He's got a long-standing collaboration with Kenneth Branagh, but Brian De Palma, Mike Newman, Amma, to name but a few, and he's good company. So hopefully you'll enjoy that episode of the podcast. In the meantime, I shall see you back here next week. Stay safe, look after each other. See you next week.